What's up, everybody? How you doing this morning? Jazz Shepherd here, checking in. Just want to share a few thoughts with you. It's a foggy, rainy day here in Minnesota. We got snow and potholes, rain, water. It's a mess. But let's a little bit of insight. Me and Ken Micallef, the jazz vinyl lover, have been talking lately quite a bit, and we don't all see eye to eye on the Avant Garde New Thing and purpose and place and meaning and direction behind, you know, free jazz and the late era stuff. And so I'm doing a little memory jogging of my own experience, because I came very much from that school, from psychedelic rock and hard rock into the Coltrane's and Eilers and Sheffs and Ornette Coleman's. That was the jazz I connected with when I was in my 20s and my 30s. And I spent a lot of years as a single guy, being a DJ and a musician, and in that context, I think those records always kind of were a bit of a pain salve for myself. The expression and the anger and the venting. As a single man, I think it was therapeutic for me at times. Fast forward a few years, my wife and two stepkids moved in 6 years ago, and it led to me not listening to nearly as much jazz the first year and a half, because it just wasn't, a lot of that free avant-garde stuff which I listened to didn't really fit my new context, and I wasn't trying to make her uncomfortable or drive her away from jazz. And eventually I ended up moving my entire vinyl collection out to the garage, which diminished my jazz listening time greatly. And it was a sacrifice I had to make for my family, but it was the right thing to do. And it gave me some time away from it, you know. So I spent a lot of time just listening on, you know, streaming devices, and just listening to music that my wife liked a lot too, you know, pop and hip hop and you know, whatever else, trap and, you know, lounge stuff. But as I slowly started bringing some records back in, the jazz was the first thing I wanted. But I noticed that what I wanted to listen to, I wanted her to embrace. And so it led me listening to more piano trios and more guitar jazz and more approachable jazz. And I think this might be part of where my climate change is wrapped around in, is that as I dug deeper into the jazz I once thought was softer or had less to say, I was actually amazed by what I felt and how much more it had to say than I thought it did. And how this music that was modern jazz still, but just not, you know, screeching horns, how it still embraced its audience at the same time, but still vented a lot of the same pain to the same degree. And that wasn't something I was really prepared for. I wasn't conscious of that initially. And I think part of why I shudder to put on some of that stuff now is I know it's going to make my wife uncomfortable. And in a context, especially as a DJ, it makes me think to myself, what are you accomplishing if the music you make makes most people want to leave the room? Like, it's self-indulgent, it's cacophony, you know. So I think that's a lot of where this comes from inside of me, is this change in my own perspective. And I feel there's a strong current that dismisses a lot of the easier to listen to jazz as not being as hardcore or as heavy. And I think it is just as heavy as anything, you know, the free avant-garde cats ever did. And it doesn't lose that audience. I think for me, an interesting whole point in jazz was I listened to jazz for 15 years. And I've listened to the playing and the grooves and the rhythms and the sounds and the solos, but I was never hearing jazz. I was just listening as a musician, as a drummer, as a, you know what I mean, and listening to what the documentaries and the books had to tell me as to what was important and what was, but I wasn't really hearing it or feeling it myself. And it was when I first started recognizing that a horn player is emoting the same as an MC would on a rap track. He's expressing himself for 16 or 32 measures, and there's a context behind what he's saying that's different than just a simple 1 2 1 2, put your hands up in the air. There was a depth to it. And I remember listening to Coltrane's Blue Train one day, and Locomotion on side 2 is playing. Fuller does a great 16 bars. Coltrane opens the song, and it's a great little chorus, and they all stick together. And then there's this little break, and Lee Morgan comes in spitting fire, and my heart just felt his anger, his tension, it was like an aha moment, an epiphany, saying, oh my God, if I stop listening and start feeling, just try to feel what a cat's telling you in his solo, and how he's interweaving that with what the other cats in the group were saying at that time. It changed forever to me how I listened to jazz. It really did. And it was almost like I had to go back and re-listen to everything over again. And when you just start feeling and stop trying to listen and hear, the scales and the solo, and stop hearing virtuosity for the sake of it, but recognizing that virtuosity is a byproduct of this great sorrow and the underlying feeling that a guy's trying to express. And it means a guy like Hank Jones on a piano trio record can be telling you just as much as a Pharoah Sanders can be screeching on a horn. And if anything, the experience of the guys, the further you go back, is going to be worse. But to balance that experience, it comes with a greater hope and a greater optimism. There's no question the Avant Garde, the new thing, free jazz, plays an important role, especially in the 60s. The 60s were a very combative time, a very inflamed moment in our history. And so the music had to reflect that on some levels. And as I've gotten older, hopefully a little bit wiser, I've gotten to the point now where Coltrane pretty much fills those needs for me. Like, if I need a little bit of angst-ridden fire, I don't really need to go too far beyond Coltrane too often. I think Blue Note does a few really cool avant-garde pieces with Grasha Mancour, some of Jackie McLean's stuff, some of Lee Morgan's Search for the New Land. Some of those records are very approachable, avant-garde. And I think even a lot of the most far-out Archie Shepp, Pharoah Sanders, Albert Ayler records all have moments that are beautiful, but they can descend into a cacophony that I don't have the patience or the ear for very often anymore. But I don't want to watch a child get beaten very often either. I don't want to watch lynching happen very often either. And so it doesn't change that history. It doesn't mean it's not viable and an important part of it. But anyway, the point of this was just, I think somehow my couple years away from listening to jazz daily, having my vinyl at my fingertips, when I came back to it, I was digging deeper into stuff that my wife would not cringe at. And I was amazed to find how much substance and meat was on those bones. And so sometimes I think I come off a little too derogatory towards the avant-garde and that era. But it's because I think I've found just as much to say in the earlier stuff. There's just as much politics and race and tension and sociology and black experience in a white America. And in many cases, I find more of that sorrow balanced with a great hope and optimism. So anyway, hope you all understand what I'm trying to get at. I still love the new thing and the avant-garde. It's just not a place I need to visit very often. I can watch Schindler's List once every 20 years, Y'all have a great day. I get back to driving on these foggy ass roads. Maybe some Charles Mingus here, foggy day. But y'all be safe. You have a good day. Peace.